Wow, good morning and welcome to our virtual speaker series, What to Know About H2O. I'm Francesca Hernandez-Feliz, Interim Association Executive of the Marin Realtors. Thank you for joining us. This is the second in a set of 4 speaker series this year. We have a full agenda today and I look forward to getting you out on time. But first, there are a couple of housekeeping notes that I'd like to share. Everyone is muted by default. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A feature, and we will do our best to get to them throughout the meeting. I'd like to recognize our 2025 President, Anna Frost, all of the Board of Directors, and our committee volunteers. Before we get started, one last important disclaimer. The views expressed by our guests are their own and not necessarily those of the Marin Realtors. Also, nothing should be taken as legal advice, nor shall it be considered tax advice. As always, ask your broker, manager, or relevant professional. Additionally, please do not discuss compensation or compensation-related issues in this forum. Lastly, this event will be recorded. All right, President Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francesca. And Francesca, welcome to your new role as our interim association executive. I can hear the gallery clapping. We're delighted to have you, Francesca. It's a real treat, and I look forward to working with you. I'm also really excited to kick off this meeting. We are here for our program today with President Matt Samson of Marin Municipal Water District. I grew up with MMWD, so that's what I'll say from now on. I don't know who came up with the clever phrase of what to know about H2O, but as I understand it, this will be my first time of hearing Matthew speak, and he knows everything about that you want to know about H2O. Very knowledgeable about all things water related, and we are very honored to have him join us today. He's spoken to our Government Affairs Committee, and I want you guys to know that that is something we do all the time. Our Government Affairs Committee is committed to learning about things and finding things that our realtors will benefit from knowing. So when we get a speaker that is as excellent as Matt and is also informative, we do our best to bring them to the general membership right away. And that is what we're doing today. Matt currently serves as the Deputy Fire Chief of not our town, but South San Francisco Fire Department in San Mateo County. He spent 24 years in emergency services, beginning in Santa Barbara and continuing as a firefighter with Marinwood Fire Department and now with South San Francisco. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of California, Santa Barbara, in geography, and is a graduate of the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer Program, where he earned the Mano Award for outstanding research on emergency fire servicing issues. I found that fascinating, Matt. Someday I want to know how you research those. In addition to his deputy chief role, Matt enjoys teaching fire-related courses and has been a fire science instructor with the City College of San Francisco for the last 14 years. Matt was raised in San Rafael and is a longtime resident of Division 1 Water Department, where he lives with his family in Terra Linda. Thank you, Matt, for being here, and I'll let you roll with it.
Great. All right. And Anna, thank you very much for those words. And also a product of Terra Linda High School. I can't leave that part out either. But also, Francesca, thank you very much for having me here. And also, I'd like to just acknowledge Romeo for all of his support through the time. Like I was saying to the group, you have a lot of speakers to choose from. So we really appreciate from the Water District side that you continue to highlight us, because we understand and we value and appreciate how much a working water system is to the real estate market, just the quality of life throughout Marin County. So appreciate the engagement and that. And so today, what I'm hoping to go through for the next 45 minutes or so is an update on where we're at with our water supply projects. And this is coming out of the 2020-2021 prolonged drought period where we really were in a crisis. And so I'd like to walk you through from that part again to where we're at today and to help show the solution set we've been putting forward to start solving our way out of the problems we faced in 2021 and hopefully never have to repeat those again and making sure they're a thing of the past. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation here. And I'm just going to make sure everybody can see it once I get to the display
Matt?
piece. Yes.
Sorry, I forgot out an important piece, if you don't mind me
Yes.
interrupting before you get started. We will have time for questions at the end of this, folks, but please use the Q&A session. Do not use chat. Chat will be a place where you can get links and things that Francesca can put up if that becomes necessary. So Q&A and stay for the questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And so a quick overview of what I'm hoping to talk about today, a background again on the water district, just to refresh everybody's history and set the stage for what we're dealing with in terms of challenges and opportunities for our water supply. Talk about the big, huge endeavor we went through, what we call the strategic water supply assessment, and then looking at what that assessment provided us in terms of options or alternatives, how we screen those alternatives, and to get to the project that we just approved. And then the last one is a project that came out of the research we weren't originally focusing on, but we found, the proverbial low-hanging fruit that we have opportunity to move on that will help with our water supply system. So again, let me just make sure I have it. Yes. So, we've got a pretty big water district in terms of land. It's pretty unique that our water is sourced here in Marin County. We get most of it, 75% of it, from our local reservoirs. We've got quite a big service area. Most of Marin County, south of Novato, excluding West Marin, and our district provides water to about 191,000 people every day. And that number, 191,000, that equates to production or distribution of about 20 million gallons of water throughout our service area every 24 hours. Again, locally sourced, you can see the watershed areas down in the bottom right on the map. And then we do highlight the pipeline coming out of the Russian River watershed that provides us with about 25% of our water. And I've used this slide before in the past because we have what I think is a real vulnerability in our system. And when you're looking at 25% of water or your source being transmitted or conveyed through a single pipeline, you have single points of failure for a pretty significant component of your system. So that was one of the mindsets we went into trying to solve for, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. You can see the areas we distribute through, and then the 7 reservoirs we have, 5 on the northern aspect of Mount Tam, and then 2 up in West Marin area, both reservoirs that were created as they're our newest ones, both Nicasio and then Sulahuli. Sulahuli Reservoir is the one that was actually created out of the drought in the late 70s, early 80s as a response to that water supply component to it. We have a lot of things going on. 22,000 acres of land. That includes Mount Tam as well as West Marin, very biodiverse area. And the reason why I touch on this is this component is the competing priority for a lot of the water supply projects we do. There's an environmental tag on a lot of the things. So this is something we're constantly battling in a good way to try to get the best project forward, but I'll touch on some of the impacts it has had as we try to progress forward with some of these projects. So in 2020, 2021, the district was in crisis, and I don't say that lightly. We were in a financial crisis and we were in a water supply crisis. So going back to that time, we were actually into the red monthly based on revenues and expenses, about $1 million. So every month, rainwater's reserves were being drawn down. And so we expected if we had continued on the same trajectory, we had continued to go run out of money by 2023, which is a scary concept. And we were also almost out of water to the point where we had to authorize roughly $120, $130 million for an emergency pipeline across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge that would help us with our water supply issue. But it was for a very limited amount of water. It would have been a very environmentally negative impact to a lot of communities, and we really would have been not looked upon kindly in the court of public opinion as we look to take advantage of what we would consider disenfranchised communities in the East Bay, just to make sure that we could get our water when we wanted it. So you can see the timeline, how it went. We started a water supply assessment. This was in the year that I was lucky enough or fortunate enough to be elected into. So it wasn't part of the first component, but the high level evaluation of everything we could do went into this water supply, meaning every option that we could think of, whether it was recycled water or desalination or expansion of reservoirs or more water from Russian River or a variety of other small projects that we could aggregate to try to get us to where we're at. And we had a little bit of breathing room because we had the miracle rain in October of 2021 that shut our reservoirs up. So it gave us a little bit of breathing room, but as we see now, breathing room should not be a time to relax. Breathing room should be a time to plan, really move forward and try to bolster so that you're prepared for the next drought. And one of the things that you'll hear me bounce back and forth quite a bit between my day job and then the hat I'm wearing today with the water district is there's a component of planning in there that's critical. And for the fire service, we've always used the wintertime or the rainy season to prepare for the summer, because if you don't do that, you'll be caught, unprepared come the first fires. And that mindset I've taken forward with the water district. We should be constantly preparing when our reservoirs are full, because at some point they won't be. And if we don't have a plan to address that, we're in big trouble. And we've been given basically a gimme or a pass by Mother Nature coming out of the 2021 drought. So now it's really time to take advantage of that. So in 2023, the water supply system or assessment came back and said we need about 8,500 acre feet a year. And an acre foot, just for understanding, is if you took an acre, or excuse me, about a size of a football field, and you built a wall a foot in height around it, filled it up, that's about an acre foot. And so we need about 8,500 more acre feet a year of available water supply to stop us from going back into drought conditions, or excuse me, be susceptible to drought should we not get any rain. And so that number is pretty aggressive. And what I mean by that is the water supply assessment didn't just say, hey, if we had 2021 again, what would we need to get through it? It actually stacked up 2021 and then doubled the length of the impact. And so we wanted to make sure that there's safety built in for it, and for a few reasons. One, we want to make sure we can try to get to the goal. But two, the climate that we're seeing now, or the rain patterns we're seeing now, are different than the way they used to be. And what I mean by that is our rain season is being compressed, where it used to be much longer in terms of October 1st all the way to the end of April, May. We're seeing the same amount of rain, but we're seeing it in a much more compressed period. And where that challenges us is we have very small reservoirs in Marin, relatively speaking. So the less we spread out rain, the more likely our reservoirs are going to be overfilling, because it's a short period of time and we don't have a refill capacity. And I can go in that in a little bit. I know it's a little bit of a hard concept to try to articulate, but we like nice spread out rain seasons for a variety of reasons, but we don't have that. So that was a driving factor to make sure we had enough storage going in there. And then we moved to what the water supply system took a look at. We really tried to evaluate all the options, and we narrowed it down pretty well. Now, there was a move this winter that is a little bit controversial, and I'll touch on why I think it's a little bit controversial, but why I'm not too concerned about it. And that's in the bottom right, where you see water efficiency measures led to a reduction of water supply goal by 2,000 acre feet. So we've narrowed it down to 4 alternatives, and we've now have what we actually have moved forward with the preferred one of those 4, but the other 3 don't drop off the list. So when we looked at our demand, and this is the little bit of the controversial part, what you see there is we had a baseline need of 8,500 acre feet, and that's what I was talking about with the supply assessment, or SWSA, as you see as an acronym. When we start trending the water use by our customers coming out of this drought, the 2021 drought, we have not experienced a rebound that we've expected. And historically, as droughts happen, people's water use drops off considerably when we call out for conservation or reduction in water use. And then we try to throw a bunch of different measures at it, whether it's a low-flow toilet or removing your grass and replacing it with something that doesn't need the amount of irrigation, drought-tolerant plants, a variety of things. And so we don't ever see usually a return to a traditional demand, but we get somewhat close. Well, this time we haven't gotten that close. And so we've been well below what we've had before. What I mean by that is prior to this drought, we were averaging about 26, 27 million acre feet of water a day. Excuse me, 27 million gallons of water a day, production-wise. And we're still down at 20 million, sometimes a little bit less right now. as an average throughout the year. And so we don't see this big rebound. So we've lowered our initial need down to 6,500 acre feet. That still gets us way higher, and I'll show you what that would mean in terms of, had we had this amount of water historically for the past 20 years, what that would have meant for 2021. Is it the best thing? I don't know. It's hard to say, because I think we should still be planning for 8,500, and we're going to continue to do that. But the impacts of what we just approved and moving forward is going to continue to buy us more room while we look for what would be the most important, I think, big project. When we look at that 8,500 acre feet, we had a reduction in demand of 2,000. That's the conservation effort I just mentioned. The purple project actually just popped up. We've done some in-system improvements for our system currently. And then, so we need to make up about 4,700 acre feet per year of additional water supply. And the in-system improvements, and we're going to touch on the purple project a little bit later. Actually, I have about 4 or 5 slides on it. It's a pretty neat project that we're going to go over. And that was the low-hanging fruit that I mentioned at the beginning. But the in-system improvements are pretty important too. And there's just a lot of stuff that's been going on that we're trying to make up for lost time. And what I mean by that is, when you look at that distribution system slide we had where water's coming out from Russian River, about 25% of our water comes from there. Part of the challenge is, one, we can't get all the water that we're contractually, that's contractually available to us due to constraints with the distribution system. The pipes aren't big enough, the pumps aren't strong enough. But the other side of that is, our system, because it was cobbled together over 100 years of all these little water companies combining into one municipal one, we actually couldn't get a drop of Russian River water to every home in Marin if we had to. We're starting to change that. And so we want that water to be able to be distributed everywhere. And we're making pipeline and pump improvemements so that we can do that. And the reason for that is resiliency. We're constantly driving on resiliency, but we're also driving on the fact that if we already are allowed to take more water, we just can't do it because of physical constraints. Let's undo those constraints so that we can start getting as much water as we're paying for already, and get it through the system itself. With that, the reduce in demand, Nicosia spillway, then we're really looking at the 4,700 acre feet, and that's where we looked for the 4 big projects and started evaluating them to determine what would be the next best step. When I talked to the group in the past, I brought forward a strategy that Marin Water took on when we looked at this, the water supply project, and that was 3 different categories of projects: the short, medium, and long-term groupings. Short-term stuff we can do right away to get us a little bit more breathing room. Medium ones to buy us additional time, improve the system, improve reliability, improve resiliency. And then a long-term, what's the really big one? That really big project is going to provide us a really substantial amount of water to get us out of where we're at. And we started aggressively moving on the short ones. The board was very aggressive out of the gate, authorized quite a bit of money, directed staff to shoot a lot of staff time at that. And this is the graph you've probably seen, or the graphic you've probably seen before. And some of the short-term projects were at the very top. We wanted to electrify Sulahuli. What I mean by that is that reservoir sits out in West Marin. It's got 10,000 acre feet of water ready to use anytime we need it. It's got a beautiful pump station, but there's no power to the pump station. It was designed as such. And so we've been working, we wanted to electrify it right away, but I'd say our partners at PG&E, but PG&E has they've just made the project very difficult. There's an issue with potential amount of power out there. They're not open. They haven't been too open about looking at alternative sources, meaning either floating solar panels or solar panels around there. And so it's been pretty tough, and they've made it to the point where it's, we'll have to see how much it's worth it based on the cost to bring power out there. And that project too, which is interesting, Sulahuli, when you pump, and if you look at the way they're spread out from north to south, Sulahuli is the northernmost reservoir, and you get water from that reservoir into Nicosia, which it can then be pumped into the distribution system through the treatment plant in San Geronimo. There's no pipe. And so it actually goes through open areas. So we tried to pretty aggressively to get grant dollars to fund the pipe. They were not most federal funding right now is hung up. So we're looking for our district funds to be able to create that, so that as soon as that pump station gets electrified, we'll be moving on it. The other one, the forecasting and stream release automation, that was actually a component of Lagunitas Creek. So from Kent Reservoir out to Tomales Bay, Lagunitas Creek has been identified as a pretty successful spit coho salmon, steelhead trout breeding ground. So we are required by state statute to release water at a certain flow rate all year long. And so prior to this effort, it was a little bit of a guessing game about how much water we release out of Kent Dam to meet those downstream flows. And so there was a meter way downstream. And so I kind of equate it to, getting in the shower. You're not really sure where hot is. You turn it all the way hot, and then you turn it back to cold, and you're trying to find the right spot. Our folks were basically doing that with a release from the reservoir, and the result was releasing excess water just to make sure we met those needs. We've actually moved on new stream gauges, a lot of technology brought in, and so we're going to be able to save 1,500, almost 2,000 acre feet a year just by modernizing the way we release water out of the lake. And then one of the other short-term projects we talked about that we were really excited about and really wanted to move on was a dedicated pipeline from Phoenix Reservoir in Ross up to Bontempi Reservoir in the watershed. And the reason for that is Phoenix Lake is an incredibly small reservoir, only a couple hundred acre feet total, and it's constantly spilling water every winter when it rains. And so our thought was, let's take that water that's spilling, pump it up to Bontempi, which is a much bigger bucket, much bigger reservoir, and fill it up until it's full, and at least we can save some. Kind of this big bucket, small bucket project we talked about. Move forward, it was going to be really low. It was going to get us, almost 1,000 acre feet a year, and you start putting these numbers together, all of a sudden it's meaningful. But the environmental challenges came in, and there was a group that was really wanting to restore that creek from the bay, Corte Madera Creek, all the way up through Ross to potentially return fish populations. We saw it as pretty challenging, and there's portions of that creek that are concrete sides, which is not conducive to animal habitat at all. They run through private yards where people could potentially be putting fertilizer on their lawns, doing anything, all out of our control. And so when we got legal challenges on that, we actually put that one on the back burner pretty quickly because we didn't feel that the juice was worth the squeeze to be able to fight too much on that one. But coming out of it, and what's really actually a silver lining, is that better understanding of some of the concerns, and this new approach that we're taking now is going to be applicable to the Nicasio spillway gate raise that I mentioned earlier, which I'm really excited to be able to talk about just a bit. So when we looked at the water supply assessment, so going back to the assessment came back and they said, all right, folks, here's all of the viable options that we can look at. And so starting on the left, the roadmap, we looked at 3 different general categories. How can we potentially get more out of our partnership with Sonoma Water? How can we make our own buckets or reservoirs bigger? And then is there any way we can start making water in a cost-effective way that will provide a bunch of different benefits? And from those 3 categories, you can see we had quite a few alternatives in the conveyance partnership with Sonoma Marin. We looked at 11 different ways to increase our reservoirs, and then we looked at 9 new supply alternatives. And those numbers might seem a little high, but when you break it down, you'll see that something like a desalination plant has 3 alternatives based on water production capacity. And as we continue to whittle it down through evaluation, we got down to smaller numbers. You can see 13 to 3, 11 to 3, but the new supplies stayed the same. And then out of those 3 categories, we had the 4 recommendations you see all the way to the right. The PETA 3, PETA 3 is a Petaluma acronym for where the pipeline would come, or an enhanced pipeline at Sonoma. The local storage, we looked at just 2 reservoirs based on feasibility. That was Sewell, and Kent, both to raise, and we'll dive into those just a bit. And then the most cost-effective supply project landed on the 10 million gallon per day desalination plant. And going back to thinking about what I said, we're at 20 million gallons a day use right now. And so that would actually provide half the day's use, but I'll go into some of the constraints that the desal project would do and why it's causing us a little bit of a challenge. Looking at all the options, we start with a whole bunch of things, but basics is how much water can we get, how much does it cost, and then we use average acre foot cost for these productions, and they're based on categories. The first one is a conservation category. What you see is AMI, or advanced metering infrastructure. It's basically a smart meter for your home water system that gives each homeowner a better idea of how they're using their water. Right now, one of the challenges we have is everyone in the district gets a bill every 2 months. And so you have no idea where your water spikes and where they weren't, what you use water on, et cetera. Or more importantly is if you had a leak or not. And so this will be able to detect leaks and things like that. I don't think it's panacea. I don't think it's a silver bullet, but I do think it's a logical component of a modern water system. Below that, you see recycled water in purple through a variety of different options. There's some specific projects like Sandpoint Prison or Peacock Gap Golf Course. And then you see different kinds, direct potable reuse or indirect potable reuse, just different technologies on how water is recycled. Direct potable means it's actually coming right out of the factory or plant going into a pipe in the system with potable water already. Indirect is it's treated just a little bit below, then that water is placed into the reservoirs, then the water goes through the regular treatment plant and get there. The desalinization of a variety of capacities. Below that, the local storage enhancements, and then the bottom one is the conveyance piece. And from these, this is where we really whittled it down. If you look at the storage in the yellow, Nicasio spillway modification, that's new, and we'll touch on that. Schoolhooley and Kent. And then there was an option for an upper Nicasio dam raise, which is an extension of that reservoir itself, but the cost estimate escalated pretty quickly. And if you look to the right, and there's a variety, or quite a big range of cost per acre foot. And the actual unit costing makes a lot of sense when we do this. It's pretty clear and concise and consistent across the board. But when you look at some of these costs, you can just see how much more expensive it is. And what I mean by that is, right now, we're about $1,000 an acre foot from our reservoirs, what the cost is for us. So we're talking up to 10x, 11x of what we would be paying compared to what we're paying currently right now. Now, we pay about $2,000, $2,500 for an acre foot from Russian River. So that water is still well below the cost of anything we see here. But cost isn't the only way we evaluate these projects. So when we look to screen them, be prepared. There's going to be a little bit of lots of data here in a second. We'll be able to walk through, but we looked at these 8 categories, how we evaluated projects. And so, excuse me, 7 categories. So and I'm going to break them down each individually here. So when we looked at the criteria, we looked at, what are we doing on impact? We have to be able to increase our reliability. We have to make sure we can continue to produce water. We have to be able to move somewhat quickly because time is not on our side. We don't want to degrade the quality of water we're giving our customers. We need to make sure we're not damaging the environment and we're not disenfranchising anybody or treating anybody unfairly if we can't. And then it's got to make sense economically and financially. And what I mean by that is, our customers trusted us for one of the most significant rate hikes in Marin Water's history 2 years ago. And we do not take that lightly, and we definitely appreciate that. And so from that appreciation, we are trying to create a project that is affordable within the current rate hike project. We don't want to go back asking if we don't need to. And so that was a driving factor on that. So lots to look at here, but you can see, the Cliff Notes version of this is if it's dark green, that means it scored really high in these categories. You look at recycled water for purple pipe means tertiary, just for irrigation or dual plumbing for some of the new developments going in the current recycled water distribution area outside of Novato, mainly the Terra Linda area, San Benicio area, Lucas Valley, Marinwood. It's got a lot of really good benefits, but you look at the cost and you're starting to talk about quite a big capital outlay cost for that. And we're not really sure if it's going to meet what would be easily taken care of by a recycled water that's either indirect or direct, the next category down once technology changes. looking at recycled water and then desalinization, they don't really have many high scores on this comparison. And that's mainly driven by cost. There is a water quality component to it. You know, they think is the elephant in the room. People are concerned about drinking recycled water or desalinated water, especially if you've spent quite a bit of time here and you're really used to the high quality of water that comes off our watershed, and we get that. But with these two components, you know, recycled water and desalinization, one of the challenges we get, and it's hard to message this publicly, but these systems cannot be shut down. So they must run all year long, because if they get shut down, the maintenance to get them back up and running once they get shut down for a certain amount of time can be very high. You know, we look at, you know, coming out of the 80s drought, Santa Barbara City was very aggressive to create a desalinization plant down by the water. And once they got created, funded, and built, then it wasn't needed because we started experiencing rains again, and even in Southern California, they came out of the drought. When they wanted to turn it on in 16, when they wanted to turn on 2021, or excuse me, in 2016, or a little bit earlier, the actual cost of maintenance to get it back up and running exceeded the initial construction cost of the project based on time, inflation, and those things. And so while it really, really, really creates a reliable water supply, you know, desalinization, it doesn't matter if it rains or not, it doesn't matter if you use water or not, it's always going to be there, but it's going to come with a very high cost, and the water quality is not going to be as great. It's still going to be decent and good. It's very healthy. It's not terrible. You're seeing it all up and down the state, but you have to have it on all the time. And same with recycled water. You know, the quality of recycled water is really, really high. In fact, it's exceeding a lot of the local water districts throughout the state's water quality, because it's going through so much filtration as opposed to what they're doing generally with our water. But when we look at recycled water and desalinization, I think we need to have this as a component. The concern for me right now is technology is not there yet, and they're still building the plane as they're flying it, meaning Sacramento, with regulations on recycled water. So we start down a pathway, it might not be the best for us. But we do need to be able to produce our own water. I'm just not sure what the solution, how that actually fits in. Where these two systems really benefit, and it's a distinction between Northern California and Southern California. Northern California is in temporary periods of drought, meaning we'll have rainy season for a few years, and then it'll be drought for a few years, and then rainy season. Southern California is in a consistent drought in terms of available water, and so they will always have a need for this. In Marin, if we opened a desalinization plant or a recycled water plant right now, even in January and February, we would have to be running the systems and putting them into our water system and running it at very high electrical costs, very high production costs, even when our reservoirs are spilling water. So if we can figure out a little bit operational, a little bit better way to do it in terms of costing, then I think we have a really interesting opportunity, because it will provide a much needed benefit. And I think the benefit we're going to see from it is, once we figure out where it fits into our system, it will reduce the demand on the potable side that we currently enjoy. And so we have a much lower demand on our reservoirs. Much lower demand on our reservoirs is essentially creating a larger reservoir for that. So pretty excited about that. Moving down to local storage, this is really, I continue to say, this is where we need to be. And so we looked at a lot of different reservoirs, and putting up a new dam in Northern California, when every movement across the state is to tear down dams, was going to be really difficult. And so when we whittled it down, we looked at two reservoirs, which I've spoke about before, Kent Reservoir on our district lands, and then Suluhuli, which is district lands and private lands up in West Marin. We looked at arrays for both of those dams. Kent Dams actually was raised once. It was raised in the early 80s in partnership with the creation of Suluhuli as a response to the late 70s drought. And then the Suluhuli one is going to come with inundation of private property, with potentially having to pay for 30 to 40 structures, homes, barns, outbuildings, support buildings, and things like that, plus the loss of productive agriculture up there. Is it impossible? No. Does it make a lot of sense? Yes. The question really becomes, two parts. One is the cost to implement, and then a timing, because once we go into the legal system, which we will in any of these projects, things are going to slow down considerably, and slowing down does not agree with the problem we're facing. And the Sulahui one can get incredibly expensive, let alone dealing with the change to people's livelihood. And what kind of worried me a little bit was the Sulahui component. We started hearing that through eminent domain rulings from Northern California, the judicial system, court system, that they are incorporating cost not only of value of land and structures, but also projected cost over a certain time frame that we would also need to compensate for. And so if there's a financial benefit to these lands, meaning they're actually productive, making money, selling things, we'd have to incorporate that for a certain amount of time moving forward too. So that cost gets incredibly expensive. You know, we could see a $600 million project balloon to $1 billion overnight, and that's just very tough to have to actually address. And then Kent itself, it's on our land. You know, we're going to have some environmental challenges to it. You know, a couple of the things, you know, Kent Reservoir, because it's in the northern spotted owl habitat, will reduce our construction window. So we'll only be able to operate about 4 months a year. We'd have to run crews 24/7, 4 months a year, which is not the end of the world. The challenge for Kent is that because of the way the dam was raised last time, we've found out we can raise it again, no issue, but it has to be upstream from the current dam. Not much, just a little, but anything upstream means we have to drain the district's largest reservoir for potentially 2 to 3 years and be without half our water supply for 2 to 3 years. That scares me a lot. I don't know if I can support rolling the dice with that kind of potential outcome. So there's a little bit of constraints on the local storage piece, but I've got silver linings, so I'm not giving up on it yet. And the last one, the conveyance project. So conveyance is just water pipeline from Sonoma County down. It adds up real fast, but it's going to score the lowest in reliability and sustainability just because the fluctuations in what we actually get from Sonoma based on this new pipeline will vary. But even with a minimum one that you see 3,800, is still quite a bit of water if you look at going back to that, what we're trying to hit, that 6,500. So these categories were all broken down by each of these projects were broken down even further. So when you see the reliability and sustainability, this is actually what went into it, how much water we can get out of it, all the little projects in there. You can see the local storage with Kent, Sulahui, and Upper Nicasio. And you look and you say, well, that's not a 5,000 acre feet. It's not a lot of water when you look at local storage. That's divided over a 4-year drought. So all these numbers, the projects would provide a lot more, but we're going on a 4-year drought, meaning that we would see no rain for 4 years. So if we saw no rain for 4 years, how much would these projects provide per year over 4 years? So if you look at the local storage area, you see Kent at 5,000 acre feet. That means that we've raised the dam to increase the size of the reservoir by 50%, meaning it's a 20,000 acre foot new level, but divided by 4, that's why we get the 5,000 acre feet a year, which is still pretty significant in terms of our water supply capacity there. And you can see the numbers all follow the same mathematical logic as you do that. And we went through reliability and sustainability, you know, the flexibility and resilience. How does that play into it? You know, will this be drought tolerant? You know, will we be able to produce our own? You know, how's it build towards the future? And schedule implementation is a big one for us too, because again, we don't have time. You know, we experienced severe drought in the late 70s. We did it again in the early 90s. We did it again in the teens. We did it again in early 2020, 2021. And that number or that distance or the variable between droughts is not increasing, it's decreasing. So we need to be ready for the next one right away, or at least be able to do it. So when we don't have something that's going to be easily implementable, I don't think it's responsible to start with that as the main focus until we can get some breathing room, build some projects in. And that's the tack we're taking on this right now. You know, you look at these timelines, I mean, look at local storage, and I keep going back to that because I think it's a priority, or it should be a priority, but at least 10 years to have an impact. Now, late 70s drought, 78, 79, the planning started 79, really try to get up. These projects were actually put into place within 5 years. But it's a different landscape back then that we're dealing with now. And the green tape is considerably more, the regulations much more, and the public engagement much more. And so we have to be very respectful of all of those when we're looking at estimating timelines. And you look at the bottom one, conveyance, which we ultimately landed on as a number one priority to move forward with. These can all be put into place pretty quickly, and that's a very important component of the thought process, what we're dealing with. Water quality, we would never be able to do anything in Marin if we jeopardize the quality of the water we're giving, and the bottom two projects would maintain that. Purple pipe, the reason why it scores high is that it's not going to be used for potable water, so we don't consider it as an impact. But recycled water and desalinization are different than what we get off the watershed. Are they still healthy and absolutely safe to drink? Absolutely. Will they taste different than what you're dealing with now? Absolutely. And so that's what we want to do. And we also are really concerned when we get into the social good of it, and I'll touch on that in a second, is if only some communities in Marin are receiving recycled or desalinized or desalinated water, is that really fair to everybody in the district? And it's more of a rhetorical question, but something to consider. The environmental component is going to be big, and it's going to be big for us because we need to maintain our lands in a way they're productive. We need to maintain our lands that they're protective of all the benefits that we have right now, meaning all the different ecosystems, all the different ecology, all the different animals and plants that we are able to enjoy in the watershed. We don't want to mess those up. And so you're looking at these all the way down, and conveyance again continues to score high, much like it did on the big chart. Social stewardship, and this is where we get into the inequality of inequity, of which water goes where, and then also taking lands for public good and how that falls in the court of public opinion. But again, you look at the bottom, conveyance continues to score high because social stewardship, a pipeline through open fields is not going to have the same impact as raising a dam and flooding someone's home. So important to consider. And then what, probably the biggest driver for a lot of this is the bang for the buck. How much are we going to be paying for these? And if so, what does that do to rates? And is it really worth it? You look at some of this stuff, even recycled water is very, very expensive. Do we want to look at, under the Peacock Gap, a $28.5 million investment of public funds to be able to supply recycled water to a golf course that would reduce their demand on the potable water system? Again, court of public opinion, but there's some varying. It's hard to defend that investment without some sort of partnerships. And desalinization, incredibly expensive. Recycled water right now, incredibly expensive to operate at cost per acre foot. And we are going to be greatly increasing our demand for electricity. We currently right now are Marin Clean Energy's most expensive customer. And we would only increase that with these because the draw for both desalinization and recycled water is incredibly high. It takes a lot of energy to force water through these membranes that help treat it and remove any of the stuff that shouldn't be in there. Local storage is a lot cheaper because once we build the dam, we have a 100-year life for it at least. The operation and maintenance for it is much less, and we always get that water, and every time it falls from the sky, it's free. So we get to save it that way. And then looking at the conveyance piece, the alternatives vary in cost, and that's why you see the different color codings there. But all of those, again, represent a city where the pipeline would come off. And they each have a different benefit to some extent, but they overall have the same goal of getting more water out of the Russian River watershed. And if you look at Petaluma 3, which we ended up going with, we can start a phase right now, and then should we need it later, we already have a second phase that can be ready to go. That increases the water quite a bit, but you see it also comes with an increase in costs associated. So again, the overall summary, this is where we got, you look at it, if we use this rubric, all the way across the bottom, conveyance continues to shine as the preferred project. And as we continue to narrow it down, so this was just the general categories of, and we look at specific, the last 4 that were brought to the top based on all of those assessments, conveyance, the Petaluma project still continues to go through. But I'll preface it with this. If we look at this process that we went through as a way to completely solve our problem, if we're looking for a silver bullet, moving forward like we did with conveyance PETA 3 is not the answer. I'll be the first to admit that. But I think there's a lot of benefits that come with it. And when we look to move towards what I think is a complete solutions package, having this component in place not only is critical, but it makes anything else we do feasible. And I'll get into that in just a second. If we look at the desal plant, this is coming off of the 580 freeway down by Target and Home Depot in San Rafael. Both Central Marin Sanitary Agency and Marin Water have property over there. This is where Central Marin Sanitary does their wastewater treatment. And then Marin Water's got a property down there that actually was used in 2000s as a pilot desalinization plant that came just south of the Rod and Gun Club, or right at the Rod and Gun Club, where we were at, I think it was a few million gallon production per day plant. It was a portable desalinization plant. It was known as a pilot project. But this is where we would want to put it in. But again, before we do this, even with these costs, to remember that we have to take this to a vote of the district, because we can't move forward on any investment on permanent infrastructure for desalinization without approval of the public in Marin County to be able to do that. So that's another big lift just to get to the starting block for something like this. It could deliver a lot of water, no doubt, but we have a lot of environmental challenges. And again, you saw the scoring matrix where some of the other issues are: running it all year long, operation and maintenance, lifespan. And one of the other things that's a little bit of a straw man, but I think it should be given some weight, is technology is rapidly evolving. And unlike a private industry or a country that is so dependent on taking the salt out of the water to drink from the ocean, we don't get to revisit this in 10 years to see where technology has improved and move forward. It's just cost prohibitive. We have to figure out a project and make it work for the foreseeable future. And for us, that's a little bit anxious and a little bit nerve-wracking. When we looked at Kent Lake, you can see in the top right corner, that little small box in there is Peters Dam. And you can see it blown up in what would be in the artist registering or the engineer's display of it in the bottom right. Having that reservoir out, we say 1 to 3 years, but in construction and government projects, really hard to meet that. And if we come into a drought period without half our water, we'd be in a really, really bad place. Really bad place. That reservoir is substantial. It's huge. And we can make it bigger. And I think we should, and I want to continue it, but I'll show you where I think we should be going with that. There's gonna be an environmental component, like I mentioned. Anytime you take habitat on the watershed, we get sued, which is okay. It's a good check and balance for what we're doing, but we'd have to be able to mitigate that somehow for that. But this project, estimate between $500 and $600 million on top of not having water available for a few years. What's interesting too is this reservoir is what really maintains Lagunitas Creek's fish habitat. And so without it, it would be a seasonal flow through there. It just wouldn't be as good of quality. So during the 3 or 4 year process, this would happen. We'd actually have to build a pipeline from Alpine Lake, the next upstream reservoir, all the way through the dry bed of Kent to be able to continue to push water down Lagunitas Creek. So it's quite a bit of a lift to be able to do that. And those requirements aren't from us self-imposed. It's a state requirement as part of our water rights when we capture and store water. Suluhui, again, if we do raise this or want to raise this, it's going to come with significant legal challenge and significant costs that could escalate to the point where it really makes it economically irresponsible, depending on how much money would be awarded to the folks that are living there. And we're very aware that this is someone's livelihood. These are families that have lived there for hundreds of years, and we don't take this kind of decision lightly. And so we really want to understand the impacts not only to families, but what it would mean to district customers. And so we got a little bit of pushback from the public saying, why is a couple families able to hold us hostage? And I don't necessarily agree with holding us hostage because, we need to make sure that the good for everybody is the priority. And with that, the good of everybody, does it make sense to pay twice as much as what we should have paid for the same result just to be able to move this forward? And that's taking into consideration the economics and the rates for everybody in our district. So where we really landed was conveyance of winter water. And on the blue line there, you see coming down from Katati tanks is what it's called, all the way down, and you see it past 37, and that will terminate in Ignacio. And we actually have a Marin water station there that treats water, make sure there's the right fluoride level in there, test water constantly to make sure the stuff coming from rushing water is as clean as they're saying it is, and then gets pushed into the distribution pipeline. Where you see the purple line cut over, that's what we call PET of 3. And there's 2 phases to it, but it's an assumption that we're going to have 2 pump stations, which looks like those hair dryers along the where the 2 pipelines cross. And then as you move left, just past Stafford Lake, you see another one that's to pump water. And then where it winds off, you can see it terminating in Nicasio Reservoir and Sewell Woolley. So we have 2 options. And right now we're leaning towards termination in Nicasio Reservoir because of the restriction we have on Sewell Woolley, not only in capacity, but without a dedicated electrified pump station and a pipe. We should put the water in our more resilient reservoir, and that's Nicasio. And so we can bring it in. Nicasio also allows us to put water to the system with relative ease because there's a direct pipeline there right to the San Geronimo treatment plant, which provides water, treated water for most of the district. But the pipeline, once it goes south of where the current aqueduct, once it goes south of where PET of 3 or the purple line dives in, it's not big enough to even take all the water we can contractually available to us from Sonoma. So Sonoma says every year we're allowed X amount of acre feet. We actually have a minimum we call take or pay, meaning no matter if we take it or not, we have to pay for a certain amount of water, but we can get additional water on top of that. This pipeline will allow us to take the additional water and put it right to our reservoir system. So now we can distribute it into Nicasio. So we always keep our reservoirs topped off in the winter time, even all the way into almost the summer months. And then water will continue into the system, into Ignacio. And now with those in-system improvements I spoke about earlier, we can distribute that through our system with relative ease. And now all of a sudden we have some real benefit. And what I mean by that is we have a project that's scalable, affordable, providing probably half of the water that we needed based on our study to get us moving forward on. But it does something for the first time that was really brought to light coming out of Southern California's fires in January and some of the catastrophic ones throughout the state of California earlier. When we look at our watershed, 75% of the water comes from reservoirs on Mount Tam. If we are to experience a catastrophic event on that watershed, my big one is fire. If we lose the ability to produce water on the watershed for an undetermined amount of time, what's our other option? Well, before we had a very constrained conveyance from Russian River. With this, we are now spreading our risk, our vulnerability of the water system or water supply across a greater area. So should one get compromised, we will have a second option to be able to maintain or get us through what we need to do, which is pretty interesting. Taking all of your eggs and putting them in 2 baskets instead of all of them in one, except for a few where we currently sit right now. So having this other option, should anything happen, it's a really big step forward in resiliency planning, sustainability planning for the district, which is great. Plus, the Russian River water is still substantially cheaper than anything else we've looked at cost-wise. But where it starts to get really interesting for us is if we have this, and this is why I think where I'm going to be continuing to be vocal is this pipeline or this conveyance project is not where we stop planning. This is the next step to help us really focus on the big project. And I look at the big project being Kent right now, Kent Reservoir Race. With this pipeline, Once it gets operational and we're able to take much more water than we currently can, and we're also right now finalizing our contract with Sonoma water agencies to be able to hopefully take a little bit more, potentially we can. Draining Kent does not become so fearful. We can drain that reservoir. We now have a pipeline that can give us a lot more water to get us through any scary situations that could come up as we're going through that, and be able to build that project with less fear of running out of water, because we now have somewhat of a new supply that can give us a lot more than we're used to. And taking that one offline is not as scary as it is right now, the way we look at it. So there's been some concern from the public by saying, well, hey, you're just tying into a different watershed. The Russian River, what happens if they get experience a drought? And so if you look at water availability on the right, so this is all based on historical averages. Every time there's been a drought, our pipeline still allows us to take water to the point where we're contractually obligated to if we want it. Meaning that even in drought, even in severe drought, the Russian River water flows still exceed the minimums at the discharge into the ocean. So there still is excess winter water even in a drought. We would take more because we can now physically able to do that and top off our reservoirs. Now, could they potentially spill from a storm? Yeah, absolutely. But this is a little bit of an insurance policy that's not going to be crushing the rate affordability. And we can now constantly have topped off reservoirs for a while until we really look to build our own big reservoir. And the reason why I say build our own big reservoir is because it's still, once you get that project, it's still cheaper than buying water. Mother Nature's giving it to us. We just don't have a place to put it. So once we get a place to put it, it makes a lot more sense to be able to do it that way. But this pipeline is going to be an integral part of all of that stuff. But it's important to understand we didn't want to move forward with a project that was be constrained like everything else based on drought, but it's not here. And the Russian River water flows, we spent a lot of time evaluating historically where the Russian water's been and what their requirements are to discharge water to make sure we still stayed under that for them. So this is where we're at right now. We have these projects moving. Everything's continuing to be moving. But we just took a turn on the conveyance piece, right to design, construction, and operate. And so we're still moving forward on those. So conservation's an ongoing effort. In-district improvements, and we're going to get there with some of these, but again, we got pretty handicapped with some of the pushback, both from our outside or exterior partners or some of the potential legal lawsuits. We're really doing well in optimizing our operations. A lot of those in-system improvements have gone up quite a bit. We've got the conveyance piece moving, and then the last one, which is really neat, that is the spillway piece that we'll get into. But I don't want people to be worried that we haven't taken our foot off recycled water or desalinization. We just had a really great presentation on a recycled water current component system and where it's going. Staff that constantly attend recycled water workshops and conferences to see and stay on top of technology and where things are going. Most importantly, regulations, because this is still a novel topic for the state of California in terms of widespread distribution. And so we're engaging constantly. We're looking currently to schedule some recycled water workshops with the wastewater folks to see where we're at, dust off some of the studies, continually to look to areas we can even implement a pilot. And some of the other electeds outside of the water district itself have started to engage the state to see where funding could potentially be coming up. And desal somewhat in that same vein. It's just constantly being evaluated for the cost piece, because again, we could get the cost, we could pay for it, we could do all that stuff, but it's going to cost the ratepayers a lot more, and it's one of the most expensive ways currently to make water. When we stack up all these things on the right, we're getting pretty close. Again, water efficiency, reduced demand, 2,000 acre feet. That's a number we've got to keep our eye on really closely, because the second water use goes up, that throws off everything. The Nicasio spillway is actually going to potentially give us 4,000 acre feet more of storage, so about 1,000 a year over that 4-year period. And then you see some of the other ones that are moving forward. Now we have to take out some of those numbers because they're not there yet. But when you look at the PETA 3 phase A, there's 2 phases to it. we're starting to get quite a bit more water each year. And where this is interesting is, I'll show you in a graph in a second about how this would have protected us from the last one. And here's your second later. So this is a reservoir storage level graph for Marin water, and it's going to terminate just after the massive rains we experienced in 2021 and start back at the beginning of the drought, we're saying, in 2019. The black trend line was our actual or experienced levels of our reservoir. So you can see it go up in the wintertime and then dive down. And when we didn't get any rain, 2020, 2021, we were really looking to be in a bad place, you know, and you look at the storage levels there based on marker by red, we start getting down to that low level, you know, 25,000 acre feet or left. There's a chunk of the reservoirs that's not usable water. So we can't even count on that. And so that's when everybody got really amped up to move to the pipeline, and rightfully so, because had we not had that rain, that would have been an issue. Now, we've asked our staff to go back and say, if we had this amount of water that we were looking to get, the 6,500 acre feet, all along in our system, what shape would we have been in? And you can see just these efforts alone, not even additional conservation, not even additional storage, we wouldn't have been that bad. I mean, the reason why these lines flatline at 83,000 acre feet is that's where our reservoirs are full. They can't get any higher, they spill water. And so even at the very, very worst, we still had 45,000 acre feet of water in our reservoirs out of 83, coming out of a pretty historic drought. Is it a place we want to be? No. But this helps me feel better that with these improvements, once they go online, once we're realizing them, once they're actually producing, that we've got a little bit more of an insurance policy as we move to really address, you know, the big project, that 10-year thing. We don't have 10 years to wait. You know, if we could have put all of our energy, all of our effort in just the Kent Reservoir raise, we would have had no real meaningful improvement in our water supply for another decade. And I can't be the person on the board that commits to that. We need to have progress constantly as we're moving towards our big game. So with that, when we talked about the Phoenix to Bontempi project,
Matt,
and we got yes.
Francesca is.
Sorry, Matt, just real quick, we are a little bit beyond the 11 o'clock hour.
Okay, I'll do, how about 2 minutes and I'll be good. Does that work for you?
Oh, perfect.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to hear you out, Francesca. You're still a little bit delayed,
Yes,
but I'm going to I'll work through this quickly. Okay, great. So one of the things we came across as we were evaluating some of the projects is Nicasio is actually the Seegers Dam here. This is off the Point Reyes Petaluma Road on the left. You can see the dam here. It's actually designed with a lot of forethought that it could be potentially raised a little bit with relative ease. And so there's a spillway function on all dams, and that is a little bit of a culvert in so that a dam, or specifically earthen dam, doesn't get overtopped when the reservoir spills. Once you do that, it compromises the integrity of the dam. So these spillways, sometimes they're pretty intense, and this one is. The folks that made this actually built in the ability to raise this dam with almost no effort. Now, there's still a lot of regulations, still a lot of things. So we have moved forward quickly, and we anticipate this project to break ground within the year and move forward to be able to raise this dam to get us almost 3,000 acre. We're actually expecting 4,000 acre feet for that piece really quickly in the time frame, 2 or 3 years. But these were just some slides I wanted to let everyone know that we have made sure to engage in everybody that we need to this time and push it back. But you can see just from where the actual dam is there, and that's the Nicasio Creek that meets up with Lagunitas Creek. And so there's a concern about the population. So we're moving forward on that. We've already we've already approved funding. We're moving forward, all efforts on this one in the pipeline. So with that, I did want to talk, Francesca, real quickly about the AB 38 inspections. I know there's a lot for the group from that. I'm going to take this hat off and put the other one on real quick.
Thank you.
So there's concern about the fire hazard severity zone maps that came out recently from the state. Marin's dropped on the 24th of February, and what that means to the real estate market. So SRA, state responsibility area, LRA, local responsibility area. Most of the areas we're talking about in Marin in terms of the built environment are local responsibility areas. And so when these came out, you can see what the requirements are. Moderate and high have been left off the prior local responsibility area maps. This is the first iteration that includes them, but they have included very high for a while. So for the real estate component of it, there's a hazard disclosure and then the AB 38 approval to be able to inspect, saying that they meet the principal space standards based on the local fire department. Right now, the process is very early, meaning that the maps dropped on the 24th of February. The fire agency having a jurisdiction or authority has to make the maps public to their constituents or their community in 30 days, and then have to adopt the maps from 120 days from that period. So that adoption includes recording with the county and recording with the state. So you are not going to see any change to the current requirements unless the agency has moved quickly until they get adopted by ordinance. Usually takes 2 readings from an elected body. Then they get uploaded or recorded, and that's where you'll see the new requirements hit. And so for high and very high, you're going to see Chapter 7A, which is just the ember resistive component of the California Building Code required for any retrofit or new construction within those 2 areas. And then the real estate disclosure, the hard disclosure, stating that the agency having authority for fire protection has signed off that the property meets the defensible space requirements and is okay to be able to, in terms of their requirement. So the best thing to do for this is contact the fire department having jurisdiction for wherever the house is in question or structure is in question, find out where they're at with their process and whether they need to move forward with that or not, because the maps aren't going to be updated until each jurisdiction adopts them and updates them moving forward. Hopefully that clears up some of the confusion on what's going on. Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you very
All right.
much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and sorry for going over, Anna, Francesca, I apologize, but questions, please shoot away, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
I will see if we have, I don't think we do have any questions. I have 1 or 2 questions, but I think what I'm going to do is say goodbye to everybody, because I know that there are people still hanging in there and want to go home. So let me just find where I am. I'm sure it's not going home. I'm very sure it's going back to work. But okay, I found my place here. So thank you, but that's the biggest thing. I mean, you cover everything. I made notes all the way through this meeting and covered pretty much every single one of them. I crossed off as we were going. So I appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you talking to government affairs for us yearly.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank all of our viewers out there. I know some of you have had to leave, but thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Before you go, I'm just going to remind you about Ledge Day. Come and join us in Sacramento for our annual Realtors Legislative Day. There's a link in your rundown. This is a great opportunity to really experience making law, how the sausage is done. So look forward to having you. There's a free lunch put into that for you if you can make it for that. So go click on the thing or call the office at 415-507-1000. And let me see what else I'm supposed to remind you of here. Suggestions. Oh, yes. If you have any future suggestions for somebody like Matt that you think would be of great value, like Matt, please call the office, call me, call one of your board members. We're here to serve. And final, thank you. I am so pleased that I just want to say to you that you talked about the fish. That was like my big question in the beginning, because people talk about opening the spillways and raising the dams. And I want my granddaughter to have water first, but at the same time, I think those fish out there and the full environment is so important. I'm so glad to hear that you take that all into account. I'd like to know, if you don't mind answering my one question here, is where do you build into your formula the construction that's going on? I mean, Petaluma is going nuts that we can see that all along the freeway. And there's finally some big loosening up in construction in Marin. Are you putting that? You must be putting it into your formulas, but how are we going to deal with that?
So we have what's considered a water system master plans requirement for any water purveyor in the state. And part of that requirement is to evaluate new construction projects based on the number of units that are being brought to market or considered. So there's a trigger. So, we're hitting that with some regularity. Our most recent one we evaluated was the Northgate project. And so we look at demand based on what's being proposed or submitted for proposal. And then we accompany that. In the States, it's pretty clear you can't account for those during severe drought years. Just your average water year. Can your system supply water? And with full confidence, we can do that. Especially with some of the efforts we've made. A lot of the home construction is being focused on Terra Linda, Lucas Valley, Marinwood, unincorporated areas. We're seeing, talks about the St. Vincent Silvera property. We see the new development that's coming to bear along Lucas Valley Road at Las Colinas. There's the Los Gamos project, the Northgate project. There's entitlements, or at least ideas being presented all up and down the valley. And what's important about that, one, it's multifamily. So multifamily instantly right off the bat is way low water, meaning less than 40% of what a single family home would use, because of the exterior components not there. And then we also require multifamily homes in the recycled water distribution area to be dual plumbed. So when you flush your toilet, you're not using reservoir water, you're using recycled water, outdoor irrigation. So there's quite a few demand limitations that's been pretty neat to be able to leverage in terms of meeting that.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. If anybody out there in the observers land wants to ask a question, please throw it into Q&A. And if not, we will let Matt go back to work too. I know that Francesca would like to say goodbye, but her system is not working right. So she can talk away and we can't hear her, and then it comes up 10 minutes later.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. And please reach out with any questions.
Thank you. We'll do that. Thank you. And we look forward to getting your presentation to share with the people.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and forward it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.